All right. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So welcome everybody. We appreciate you being here. I'm Brian Bolu. I'm the Director of Community Investments and Partner Relations. So I oversee our grant making. Abby Garrison, who's our Vice President of Community Investments, she's not on here today, but that's who Cassie and I both work closely with. And Cassie, I'll give you a second to introduce yourself as well.
Good morning. Nice to see so many familiar faces here. Cassie Nice, I'm our Community Investments Manager. I work with Brian on the grant making piece of our work and assist with our nonprofit support and innovation work as well.
Yep. Thanks, Cassie. Yeah, so here's an overview of today's agenda. We'll cover all the ins and outs of what it takes to apply towards our grants. We'll quickly go over our 2030 impact agenda and how that relates to United Way and our grant making. We'll go over what's new and what's changed with our grants. And there are a few things, obviously, that you'll need to pay attention to there. Obviously, timelines, dates, and deadlines to take note of. There are some tweaks and changes that have occurred since last year. So we encourage you all to take advantage of what we call virtual office hours, which I'll get into more later. Let's see, grant types and some of their general requirements and limitations that might apply. Cassie is going to lead the conversation with the grant making platform that we'll be using, and that's called Foundant. We've moved away from SurveyMonkey Apply, which we've used these last 3 cycles, and we're on to Foundant, so she'll do a brief introduction there. She'll also cover some of the data and metrics we'll be expecting from our applicants to promote within their proposal and also collect should you be funded. And finally, we'll obviously just cover the next steps and then answer any questions that you might have at the end. As we move along through here, if you have questions, maybe just jot them down for now, or you can put them in the chat because perhaps during the slides afterwards, perhaps we'll answer some of those as we move along. For those that are less familiar with United Way and what we do, just wanted to throw up our vision and mission statements quickly. We envision a community where everyone achieves their full human potential through education, stability, and health and well-being, with our mission being uniting people and resources and building a stronger, healthier community. Some of y'all may have heard of the 2030 Impact Agenda. This is something that we released several months ago as a result of our strategic planning. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because our VP, Abby Garrison, she walked through this in great detail just a few weeks ago. That session was recorded and is posted to our website. So if you want to learn more about the impact agenda, please go to our site and check that out. But essentially, we have 6 core action areas that you see here. This touches every corner of the United Way organization, and it's not just through grant making, it's through our advocacy and policy work, relationships with local businesses, obviously 211 and the emergency needs efforts, as well as volunteerism. So just to name a few. On our website, there is an executive summary, one-pager, and then also the full report can be accessed. So we encourage you all, if you're not as familiar with our 2030 Impact Agenda, to give that a look and go back and listen to the recording from a few weeks ago to learn more. Within that impact agenda, though, you'll notice that there are 3 impact priorities: opportunities for all children, economic mobility for families, and a more connected community. So obviously there are subdivisions within each of these. However, every applying agency must demonstrate programmatic alignment within at least one of these 3 areas. So that's going to be imperative to this process. The idea between this is that children obviously live with families, and families are connected and live within communities. So all these 3 are going to overlap with one another in some way. And specifically, you might have heard us talk a lot about or discuss a lot about ALICE, and this has been an ongoing conversation for the last several years with us. For those that are not familiar with what ALICE means, it's an acronym that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. So these are working families that are struggling and living paycheck to paycheck. And we are expecting applying organizations to ensure resources are reaching these families. We understand that not every program targets this demographic specifically, but what we hope to accomplish is that much of the resources provided are at least making their way to ALICE households. And as you can see, we threw up a few stats just to give you an idea of how many families and children are living below that ALICE threshold. So 44% of children in Hamilton County. And then if you look and drill down to single female headed households in both Tennessee and Georgia, you can see that 77% and 82% respectively lived under the ALICE threshold if they are single female headed households. One thing we're also prioritizing is the idea of 2-generational approaches. So we've learned that in many cases, one of the strongest approaches to programming is through this 2-gen effort. We're going to be prioritizing programs and grant proposals that have either adopted this approach already and it's currently embedded into y'all's work, or if you've already started having discussions and are on the verge of launching a 2-gen effort and approach to create high impact and sustainable outcomes. Also, a couple of weeks ago, we hosted Sarah Haight from the Aspen Institute, and they're the ones that put this graphic together. She gave an introduction to 2-gen, and they are experts in this field. That session is also recorded and posted to our website. So if you wish to watch that, it's probably about 45 or 50 minutes or so. Definitely give that a go because she did a really good job of presenting this to our community. So definitely give that a look if you have not already. Okay, so a little bit about our grant making and what our model looks like. Grants are open to any 501c3 located within Hamilton County, Tennessee, and then Catoosa, Dade, and Walker counties in Georgia. Agencies must have been established prior to January the 1st, 2022, and that is determined through your IRS determination letter, so we'll need a copy of that to verify. Applying agencies must demonstrate impact with the 2030 impact agenda, and this is especially true for the impact and catalyst funds, which we'll talk about later. A commitment to equity, that's going to be wrapped around this entire process, so that's still going to be ongoing. All applications and final recommendations come from volunteers in the community. So what that means is myself, Cassie, our CEO, Leslie, none of us actually get a vote and which proposals get funded or denied. That is all done by community members. What we'll also ask of applying agencies to do is provide some financial documents. The reason being is part of the volunteer process is we have licensed CPAs who give that a look over and make sure that resources that are being invested are going into financially sound institutions. So that's why we have a financial health review. And then, as we said earlier, Foundant is going to be our new application platform, and all applications and reviews will happen in that system. One thing that we really take to heart and try to incorporate into our daily work is this idea of trust-based philanthropy. It's something we adopted a couple of years ago, and essentially what this means is that our team tries to go beyond the dollar when it comes to supporting organizations. That can look a number of different ways. Cassie mentioned earlier about our nonprofit support side of things. That's a big part of our trust-based philanthropy. So our nonprofit support channels include things like collaboration opportunities, trainings, convenings, networking, all that sort of stuff. Really, the idea is to try and build capacity building within organizations to allow you all to advance your mission and serve your neighbors well. So that's the idea behind our nonprofit support arm, and is an extension of our grants and wrapped around this idea of trust-based philanthropy. So for those of you that have worked with us over the last couple of years, I hope we've been able to successfully demonstrate that in some ways. But for those that haven't worked with us previously, just know that this is something that we are quite committed to. Okay, when it comes to our grants and applying for them, these are kind of steps you can take. Obviously, the first thing is you want to ensure that your organization meets all the eligibility requirements before proceeding. We'll cover those here, but a full comprehensive list can also be found in our application guidelines, which will be on our website. Assuming you check all the boxes and your organization is eligible, you'll then need to create a new profile within Foundit to be registered and able to submit grants or work on grants. The application portal, and this is why we bolded it, is going to open. Everything kicks off on Wednesday, the 15th of January. So that's when the portal will open and we'll start, and you can start adding things in there. The first thing you'll want to do is select, impact, catalyst, or bridge funding. And you can select all three, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But essentially, we've streamlined our application process to where you only have to submit one package of applications, whereas in year past, if you wanted to apply for all three grants, you'd have to submit 3 different applications. So we've streamlined that process to remove that barrier. The first thing you're going to do, though, is submit a letter of intent, which is also called a pre-application. So things kick off on January 15th. That LOI needs to be turned in and submitted to us by February the 5th. And what our team will do is Cassie and I and other team members will then go through on a rolling basis and check for alignment to make sure that these LOIs are kind of meeting the standards that we have set as it relates to our 2030 impact agenda, and that all of those eligibility requirements have been met. Assuming you're good to go, we'll push you on through and make available the full application. And that full application submission needs to be turned in by February 27th, which I believe is on a Thursday this year. So February 27th, everything needs to be turned in. At any point in time, if there are questions, we'll have office hours open, which I will discuss here in just one second. And this is just kind of like a visualizer of our workflow. So again, LOIs are turned in. We'll check for alignment. There may be a possibility where we'll kick it back to you if we feel like some additional context needs to be provided, or if alignment is missed a little bit, or it'll be outright denied. So we may kick it back to you for some edits. Then you can resubmit that, get onto the full application. Once the full application is submitted, it then goes through 2 volunteer committees, one that does the reviews and scores them, and then the second is the Community Investments Committee, which they gather around, they look at everything from scores to community needs to how can we do this in an equitable way, and they make their final recommendations to our board for approval before we make announcements. So that's how our workflow looks. Just so you all know, in our current cycle here in 2024/25, we were able to commit $4 million and invest those into 73 nonprofits in our region. However, just so you all know how competitive this is, we received $12.6 million in funding requests through approximately 180 submitted applications. So it's very, very competitive. And with the resources we have, we try to make sure that we can invest those in areas that demonstrate the most impact, especially with our impact grants and so on. So for those that aren't quite as familiar with the level of competition that tends to happen, that's where we are. So there are going to be some changes, but there are a lot of things that will be remaining the same as well. So there will still be 3 funding types: impact, capacity, and bridge. Again, an equity lens will remain a core commitment to United Way's community investments process. Decisions are still volunteer driven, as we mentioned, and the purpose of that is to bring community voice into this work. A single year funding for Catalyst and Bridge will remain. Hamilton County will still have all 3 funding streams available to them. And through our nonprofit support efforts, regardless of grant funding status, any nonprofit in our region can be involved in this. Again, whether it's trainings and gatherings, we make that open to any nonprofit in the area. And then lastly, just to emphasize this too, because we often get questions about this, dollars raised within the specific regions will stay there. For example, if I'm a donor in Northwest Georgia, let's just say, the dollars I donate to United Way of Greater Chattanooga are not crossing over and given to organizations that reside in Hamilton County or vice versa. So dollars raised in those communities stay there. All right, some things that are changing and what are new. Again, we're moving over to Foundant from SurveyMonkey Apply as our online platform. We're also changing from our steps to success model, which has been our data and metrics and evaluation piece. That is being replaced by metrics as a result of our impact agenda. So those will be provided to you all in advance. Impact grants, and this is the big thing. Impact grants are now shifting to 3-year commitments. And with that comes the establishment of a collaborative cohort. So recipients of impact grants will be asked to participate in a cohort over those 3 years where we meet and we learn together and we try to build the greatest impact we possibly can through those efforts. Catalyst grants specifically are going to be focused on innovation opportunities. In years past, capacity building strategies have also fallen under Catalyst. However, that is now being shifted to our nonprofit support work only. So capacity building grants are no longer an option for 2025. Organizations in North Georgia are able to apply for Catalyst and Bridge Fund bridge grants only, but not for impact. This is due to the resources we have available and not being able to commit to a 3-year grant at this moment in time. And unfortunately for Marion Sequatchie, because of resources, we just can't do grant making whatsoever. However, any dollars raised in those 2 counties will stay there, specifically through the 211 helpline and the emergency services that crop up in those areas. So those are what's changing. For a full timeline of the grants and what happens after that, we have that here. Again, things kicking off on the 15th of January. Office hours are there. The deadline for the LOIs, February 5th, with full applications due February 27th. Then once more, it goes, you can see in the schedule where those volunteer things are held, and then when award announcements will be made, which we anticipate to be in June as a result of our board of directors meeting. So this will be the timeline you can expect. We often get emails about when you guys can expect to hear something. So just take note of right now, we're committed to early June. And here's my friend, Jerry McGuire. Help me help you, and please show up to office hours if you have any questions whatsoever. We know there's a lot to discuss. We know with the changes to grants, there might need to be some clarity provided. So every Tuesday and Thursday during the application cycle, Cassie and I set aside an hour of our morning from 11 to noon Eastern for anybody to just pop in, ask their question, and they can either stay or you can leave. But this is an opportunity that we dedicate to you all if you choose to take advantage of it. So some of the questions, you might have questions around, how to navigate through the new Foundant platform. We absolutely expect that to happen. If you're not quite sure which grant or grants to apply to, step in and holler at us, and we'll be glad to, walk you through those options. And then again, just any clarity around some of the specific questions and what we might be looking for. Those are sort of the things we would expect y'all to come to us with. Of course, you can reach us through email. And then if we need to set up some one-on-one time, then we'll be happy to do that as well. And you can see the Zoom link down here. A copy of this presentation will be provided. So you can click on that Zoom link and register, and we'll see you whenever you show up. All right, so we mentioned earlier that there are 3 funding types, Impact, Catalyst, and Bridge. Over the last several years, we've generally only had Impact and Catalyst grants, but then we added Bridge funds just this past year. Funding for Impact are geared towards programs that excel at transformational work in their respective communities. Catalyst will be asked to bring new and innovative ideas to accelerate impact. specifically through collaboration efforts with one or more partners. So do want to highlight that piece. And then bridge funds is largely remaining the same, where those dollars need to be reserved for and go directly to direct support services to those in immediate needs, which could be food, housing, transportation, access to healthcare, and so on. Okay, so we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into each of these and what that looks like. Again, for the impact collaborative, applying organizations should already be using or on the verge of incorporating a two-generation approach, largely focused on serving ALICE families with children. We know that there's going to have to be some flexibility there, and we recognize that not everybody has a two-gen approach currently set up. But either way, we hope that many of y'all have already had some of these discussions or already have something in the pipeline and ready to launch. So all that will be far more emphasized in this upcoming application cycle. Impact proposals, they should be data-backed initiatives that can demonstrate longevity and proven results. Proposals can ask for general operating support, meaning we know many of you all have multiple programs running. So general operating support can help provide resources to those that might be of the greatest need and will allow you all to have that sort of flexibility. While there's technically not a max funding limit request, just keep in mind what your own organization's budget might look like. And then as we saw in the one of the previous slides, the resources that we can expect to be available for investment. So there's not exactly a limitation, but we do expect there to be some level of reasonable requests. The impact grants are open to Hamilton County, as we stated. And then once more, these are going to be 3-year commitments from United Way. And our hope that this is really an opportunity for us to deepen our relationships with you all as partners and as a collaborative to where we can take impact further. For Catalyst, again, these applications will be focused on innovation and collaboration opportunities specifically. And this is going to be done by testing potential solutions towards some of the root cause issues that we continuously see in our communities. This can be done through the scaling or expansion of existing programs, or by launching a new idea that you yourself had either not tested yet at your organization, but are needing just a little bit of funds to maybe kickstart something. So either of those two ideas are fine. Max funding requests will be capped at $50,000. This is an increase from $30,000 in this current cycle versus it was also $25,000 in years past. So this is really our way of investing and leaning in more heavily into the idea of innovation and collaboration, again, to tackle multi-generational issues. And Catalyst funds will remain as single-year investments. Bridge funds are going to have the least amount of changes. The requirements on how dollars are to be used are still restricted to direct services to those clients in immediate need. We anticipate the average request to be around $35,000. You can ask for more, you can ask for less, but just based on what we've seen from last year's applications, this is about where we ended up and what we would expect. I believe we communicated in a previous Zoom session that the max or the cap was going to be at 35,000. So just disregard that. We misspoke. We just expect the average funding request to be 35,000. This is open to Hamilton County and Northwest Georgia counties, and they will also remain single year of investments. And the idea is that we want to give ourselves some flexibility in the event that there are any emerging needs that we need to then invest in a year from now. This is just a quick guide of everything we just covered for those 3 grants. So this is just to help you all out in a sort of one-pager. All right, we talked about some of the application requirements, but here's what it is in full. Once more, you need to make sure your organization has an IRS determination letter dated prior to January the 1st, 2022. As part of the application package, we would expect y'all to include your most recent 990, as well as the last 2 years of your organizational board-approved budgets. We mentioned that we have the licensed CPAs that do those financial health reviews, so that's the reason why we'll be asking for those. Organizations must have staff that live and work in the area. We know some organizations are based elsewhere outside Chattanooga, but as long as you have full-time, part-time, or even volunteer staff members located in the region providing services, that's a bare minimum requirement. Serving Alice households with children through a two-generational approach is going to be key when it comes to impact and catalyst innovation grants specifically. And then again, having those collaboration opportunities with outside organizations and entities, which can be other nonprofits, businesses, or even government agencies, those are going to be, we're wanting to see those highlighted within your applications for impact, but specifically for Catalyst as well. All right, so some of the limitations. What we're going to do this year and moving forward is that you can apply for both an impact and a Catalyst grant if you so choose. However, you will only be awarded one or the other, but not both simultaneously. So if your impact and Catalyst grants are both approved by our committee members, what will then happen is either Cassie or I will reach out to you either by phone or email and just kind of walk you through the decisions and ask you to choose one or the other if that's a situation in which we come across. All right. That said, if you are awarded a bridge fund, which again are those direct needs and services, you can receive that in addition to either an impact or Catalyst grant. That will be absolutely fine. We have a list here of proposals that we are not able to support. I just wanted to make sure these are stated clearly. Capital campaigns, endowments, individuals, and by that, what we really mean is we don't want to fund proposals where the idea is to give gift cards out to maybe a local grocery chain or what have you. We're not equipped to provide direct support or dollars directly towards individuals. Organizational membership dues, any organizations that have written policies of discrimination, private and charter schools, which this is a change. In years past, we have invested in charter schools. However, our leadership has decided that that's no longer going to be the case for this cycle at the very least. And then any sponsorship or fundraising events. So these are a list of all the proposals that we are not going to be funding. Okay. Okay, before we move on to the next section, I'll let Cassie take over. Cassie, just wanted to check in with you to see if there were any questions that came through the chat.
Yes, there's one that I just addressed as correct, and it was if we win the 3-year impact grant, does that mean we can't receive a Catalyst grant for 3 years? And the answer is that's correct.
Yeah, that's correct. However, so you've heard us speak about the idea of collaboration, right? What can happen, however, is if you are partnering up with another agency who doesn't currently have an impact grant from us, and you have them be the fiscal sponsor of that application, of the Catalyst application specifically, you can then be that collaborating agency that's tacked along with it to where they'll probably delegate the work to you guys, probably give you like a chunk of those dollars for the work. However, you just cannot be the fiscal sponsor for both an impact and a Catalyst grant. So that's kind of the, I guess you can say, workaround with that. Is you can still be involved in a Catalyst grant, but it would not be as the applying agency. It would just be in a more supportive role, if that makes sense. All right, Cassie, was there anything else in the chat?
Just got another question. How is support handled for elder orphan programs, no family or support system?
Yeah, that's going to be a tricky one. And for that person, perhaps we need to offline and maybe discuss some other ideas beyond that. We know it's just going to be less emphasized in the next 3 years. So we're really digging our heels into the two generational approach of Alice families with kids. So that's where we're heading. And to support seniors, uh, I think that's still a possibility. We just have to be a bit creative with it. So perhaps we can chat one on one offline from here and work through some options.
All right, let's move on to this next piece. I know y'all are getting eager to see behind the curtain at the application. So just a reminder, everything we talked about today, where can you go and find this? So there's our website with the arrow up top. Under our work, you'll see if some of this feels very new to you. For example, the 2030 impact agenda. There is a whole page right there at the top that you can click on. Also, if you go to our community investments page, we have several links out there as well, but we have info on the impact agenda, whichever way you receive it best. A one pager, the full report, a webinar walking you through it. That's all available at that 2030 impact agenda tab under our work. And community investments is where you're going to find all things grant related that we talk about today. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So data and evaluation, before I pull up the grant application, just want you to kind of understand the direction that we've gone with what we're asking in the application around outputs and outcomes. So on the grant application itself, applicants will be asked to select an output in the pre-application or your LOI, which is letter of intent. And then in the full application, you'll be asked about short-term and intermediate outcomes. And these will all be shared with you online, and I'll get into an example later. But let's move on to the next slide so I can tell you how it links in. Okay, so at the very beginning of the presentation, Brian showed that wheel that focused on our three priority areas. Opportunities for all children, economic mobilities for families, and last but not least, a more connected community. Within each of these areas in our impact agenda are impact goals under each subset. And from these impact goals, we've worked very closely with a wonderful organization called Highland Nonprofit Consulting, and they've helped us build out outputs. And so you'll see that when you get into the when we get into the application. And then they've helped us branch from there to build outcomes based on these goals. And then they've even gone a step further and helped us build out tools to measure these outcomes. So we're wanting to be able to show collective impact through all these areas. And in doing and asking for that, we're providing a roadmap and giving you tools and are going to be doing different learning sessions along the way to hold your hand and really walk through this together. So Brian, let's just kind of quickly go through the other areas. Here's the goals for economic mobility for families. So when you're coming in and reading through these goals, you're going to want to try and find the one that most aligns with your work before you dig into our application. And let's move on to the last one, which is a more connected community. If you're applying for Catalyst, you're really going to live here because number 3, increase collaborative and innovative relationships among nonprofit service providers is really something that we're trying to achieve through our Catalyst grants and work. All right, moving on. Okay, so this link will be live on our community investments page. Everything we talked about will be there after today, probably next week. We just like to show people before we release it out into the public. This will be the link to get to our grant page. And now I am going to share my screen so that I can show you, I guess, in the spirit here of the popularity of Wicked, show you behind the curtain of what we've been working on for y'all. So this is the grant login page. This might look semi-familiar if you've used Foundant. A lot of other grant-making organizations in town use Foundant, but everybody here, regardless of if you've used this program for another org, ours is separate and you'll have to create a new account. So when you come here, everybody will have to do this because we're all brand new. You'll click on create new account, and then it's going to ask you everything with an asterisk you'll have to fill out, and make sure to mind the format and the dashes because it's pretty particular about that. It'll ask you which counties you serve through your work. Some of these are optional. Again, make sure that you are putting those dashes in. You want to do your address, city, zip code, state, it's particular about caps lock. And then it'll allow you to go on to next. It'll ask you to fill out as the user. So whoever's applying for this grant application would be the user, and you'll want to fill out your information here. That contact number. And you'll hit next again. Are you the organization's executive officer? If yes, it'll move you right on to creating a password. If no, it'll ask for that executive officer's contact information. You'll fill that out, hit next, and that's where you'll create your password. You'll get that confirmation email. Any questions about creating your account before we dig into that application itself? Okay, it's pretty easy peasy. All right, so when you get into the main screen, it'll say United Way of Greater Chattanooga 25-26 Community Investments. It won't quite look like this, but you'll see the application. You won't be able to begin applying until it opens on January 15th. You can go ahead and create at any time your organization user account. So when January 15th comes, you're ready to hit the ground running. And if some of you are like, oh, all these questions are here and Foundant, I would love to know them ahead of time so I can build out my answer maybe in a Word document and then paste it in. Good news, this is going to be on our website. All of the questions, this will be posted by middle of next week. So as you're so bored over your holiday break, resting and want to work on your grant application, you'll have all this at your fingertips. So you can begin to start to ask questions internally or think about your responses for that LOI or that pre-application. So this is what it's going to look like when you get into the system itself. It's going to ask you to confirm and only proceed if you can check all of these boxes. So make sure to read, and if you have any questions about any of these things, you can reach out to us at any time, okay? If you're like, oh, I don't think this fits, double check with us before you move on to see if you're eligible. Upload your 501c3. This is where you'll put your mission statement. If you have a active, up-to-date candid profile, it'll allow you to click on this button and it'll just pull in this information from your candid account. So you're able to do that as well. Request title. This is where you're going to list the name of your program or the projects that the request will fund. across the different types. So if it's for Gen Ops versus a program or project, just list the name of your organization. If you're applying for more than one grant, you could say, like I would say, for instance, United Way of Greater Chattanooga Bridge, comma, Catalyst. Just let us know in that title what you're applying for. Then you're going to scroll down and it's going to ask you which grant type or types you're applying for. Everything's in one spot now moving forward. And there's just a refresher on what the different grant types are and the projected average that we expect to fund out of each of these categories. And you'll just come down here and click on which ones are applicable. I'm going to go ahead and click on all of them just so we can see the different options. And then based on what you click, different options will come down. Okay. It's going to give you a brief refresher of what exactly the Impact Collaborative is and what's expected here. And then it's going to ask you, going back to those 3 areas highlighted in our Impact 2030 Impact Agenda, it's going to ask you which one you most closely align with. And for purposes of demonstration here, I'm going to hit opportunities for all children, and you'll see in a minute what that did for us. It's going to ask you to share briefly how these funds will support your organization. And we try to give a suggested length for everything. So, we just want this to be short and sweet, not a huge piece. So you'll see that in every question, and you'll see you have a little more room than what we suggest in length in case you go over some characters. Program proposal summary. This is where you're really asked to tie back into these focus areas of our 2030 Impact Agenda. So Alice families with children, addressing needs through a 2-generational approach, collaboration is huge, equity and inclusion to move toward a thriving community for all. How are you interweaving that throughout your work? And so we had clicked up here in that drop down and said, our work most closely aligns after looking at those impact goals with opportunities for all children. So now it's going to ask you to tell us, okay, what are you going to be measuring in terms of your outputs if opportunities for all children was where you most closely aligned? We're not looking for you to check a ton of boxes here. We're looking for you to really focus in on, okay, this aligns the most with my work and is where I can measure outputs. So you'll just click on those that apply to you. And that's it for impact. Bridge is going to look similar, very similar to impact. Again, you would click on which drop down would make the most sense, where your program most closely aligns. It'll probably be the same category for this area. Catalyst, same thing. You're just going to be asked those same questions, okay? But notice instead of 3 different applications, everything's in one place and you'll just have different drop downs. Okay, moving on to some financial questions. This is asking for the amount that you're requesting by grant type. So impact, let's say I requested 75,000. Bridge, I know the projected average is 35,000. And Catalyst, no, I'm not applying for that. Make sure you put a 0. And then at the bottom here, it's going to ask your estimated total project budget. What's it going to cost to fund this project or program in its entirety? And if it's related to Gen Ops, maybe you just focus in on, okay, I selected opportunities for all children. Here are those areas within my organization that are serving children in those outputs that I checked, and just focus on that estimated total project. And then down here, it's going to ask for the total operating budget of your organization. And then you'll submit that. That is the LOI. That's your pre-application, okay? And then it's going to come to our team internally where we are going to review and check for eligibility and check for alignment with those 2030 impact agenda goals. And from there, you will receive a communication telling you you're moved on to the next stage. Here's the grant application types to continue with. So pay close note of that. And yeah, and then you can begin on the full application. So the deadline for this piece, which is the pre-application or your LOI, letter of intent, is February 5th. Then our team will get back to you as quickly as we can after we've reviewed it, and you'll be hopefully moving on to this next stage, which is the full application. And this one you'll have until February 28th, which is that Thursday, to submit. So let's go through these questions really quick. Same thing, you'll log in to your profile on Foundit, and it'll allow you to continue with that next step on this application. So you'll just click into it and keep going. The request title will carry over from your LOI. We're just asking you to give us someone other than you and the CEO of the organization internally. Like, who would be the backup person if you're out sick and we need an answer quick? Who would that person be? Give us their contact information. Just a refresher here. Select the county or region that indicates where the majority of beneficiaries of your services reside. So when you created your organization profile, you selected those that you serve, but in terms of this request, who are you going to be funding? Who will your beneficiaries be? So you'll select that county. This is a read only. You will see from what our review and team has done here, you will see a check on whichever grant type that you are approved to keep moving forward with. So you'll just take note of that and scroll down here and duplicate what our review team has checked above in these boxes. And again, this is just to give you a nice review of, okay, this is what each category of grant funding is for. These are the projected averages. So this is just some information, but you'll just need to click down here on what you've been approved for. I'm going to do impact and catalyst because there's a few different questions in that versus bridge that I just want to go through. All right, then you'll come down here. Again, this is read only. You will see the amounts that you requested from your pre-application or LOI. And then in here, we're going to ask you to put those same numbers in, or if we reached out and said, we see alignment with your catalyst request, but not your impact request, then you would just put 0 for the impact here because you're just going to keep moving forward with that catalyst request and keep those other numbers accordingly. All right, then moving down here, this is just a quick question. We're just trying to gauge what sort of information is your organization collecting internally currently. So you'll just check any of these boxes. Like when someone comes to you for services, what information are you collecting? This is just to let us know. And then you have questions based on the grant type that you selected. So they'll be branching based on that. Okay, so this is where we go back to those impact goals. We're asking now for your outcomes. So based on those outputs you selected, and you'll be able to go back to your pre-application, your LOI, and say, which ones did I select again? We have a tool here that you're welcome to utilize to help keep us all in that same vein so we can measure collective impact. So you'll just find, okay, that's right, I selected opportunities for all children. You'll click on the link here and it is going to pull up a document. Don't be overwhelmed. If you join the Impact Cohort Collaborative, we're going to go through this in depth in the cohort, and we're going to also have the opportunity to hold hands with anyone who wants to walk through this tool with us. So you'll find, okay, I selected opportunities for all children, and that impact goal will be listed on here. And you're going to find, okay, now which ones did my outputs most closely align with? You'll find that in the document. Okay, this is the output I selected right here. Number of active, accessible, and quality early childhood opportunities. So this tool here shows you, okay, if you selected output 1, then these are the short-term outcomes that you want to consider measuring moving forward. And if you are applying for impact, these are the intermediate outcomes that with the tools that we have to share with you, we can help you measure moving forward. So this is just a tool to help you stay in that same realm as us as we move to measure collective impact in the community. If you have questions about this tool, you're welcome to reach out to Brian or I. But again, you're just trying to find, okay, here's the output I selected. Now let me find the short-term outcome and intermediate outcomes that line up with that. And again, we'll dig deeper into that after grant decisions have been made. In the impact request, there'll be a little question about request strategy, and that is unique to this category. In Catalyst, Catalyst is all about collaboration and innovation. So you're going to see some questions asking you to expand upon that in this section. What makes the program innovative? How are you working intentionally, collaboratively with other organizations? And then once you've gone through the questions based on the grant type you've applied for, everyone will be asked these 3 financial and administrative questions. So we want you to attach your current year financials and an income statement or your most current balance sheet, last year's financials and an income statement, a balance sheet, and recent audit. This is going to be required if you're requesting more than $150,000. If you're not, it's not required, but if you have it, please attach it. That will really help our financial review committee. And then you are going to hit submit once you get through that. And you'll have until February 29th to complete that full application portion. But just as a reminder, these questions will be posted on our website by middle of next week, and you can begin to work out your responses. Obviously, there's no branching on this sheet that I'm showing you right now, so you're just going to jump around to those pieces that you need. But you can begin to start working on those responses and hop on those office hours with any questions that you have. So I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the PowerPoint. Brian, if you want to pull that up. Thank you. All right, we can click through this, showed you. All right, next steps. Again, just review our application guidelines. These will be posted on the website by middle of next week. Make sure that you're eligible before you begin the work. Then you can go ahead and build your organization account whenever you're ready. And you can access that questions document and begin to work on your responses. And it's a great idea to add this administrator at grantinterface.com to your safe sender list. These are where the responses from Foundant are going to come from. So you want to make sure that that's not ending up in your spam or getting blocked somehow because you want to receive those communications. Moving on. Thank you. Again, this is just a reminder of the timeline. Yeah, everything on here. The deadline for pre-application should be February 28th, and at the bottom, right?
No, the full deadline's the
27th? Yeah,
27th.
you're right. Okay.
Yep.
I'm getting my wires crossed. Yeah, February 27th is the deadline there. So, yeah, that's just a reminder of the different deadlines. And then we're going to have this handy dandy resources and links page for you where you can view these webinars, other resources. If you're still struggling to figure out that 2Gen piece or need to know more about Alice, we want to provide those resources and tools to you if this is new to you. So any questions you have along the way, our email there is at the bottom, impact@uwchat.org. Feel free to reach out at any time. And I think now we're ready to open it up for any questions.
Yeah, I'll just run through some that are in the chat already. Had a direct message asking, and let's just be clear about this. When you put the dollar amounts for impact grants, especially, we know that they're 3-year commitments, but you want to put the dollar amount that's for a single year. And then that dollar amount will remain, static across years 2 and years 3. So just wanted to make sure that was clear to everybody that that dollar amount is going to be what you would expect to receive annually or are requesting for annually. So impact grants will open up once again in 3 more years after this cycle. However, Catalyst and Bridge Fund opportunities will still be open annually each year. Let's see, had a couple more. If you are an organization that provides services in multiple counties, we'll just ask you to think through how many or especially if you provide them across state lines in Tennessee and in Georgia. We ask you to select the region that best represents your clients, like where a majority of your clients are from. So we know that if you're based in Hamilton County, but then clients come to you from other areas, we recognize that that's a real thing and aren't going to penalize you for that. But if you're not sure if you need to send an application into the North Georgia folks or into the Hamilton County folks, just think through where a majority of your clients reside. Selecting multiple areas of impact. The LOI will ask you to choose one. That way we just can collect that's the types of services that your agency prioritizes. However, once you get into the full application, you will have the opportunity to select more than one or perhaps even all 3 if that's an area that your agency is going to plan on covering. Okay, so those are the questions in the chat. If anybody wishes to come off mute and ask any other questions you might have, we'll spend some time there. Last call for questions. Okay. Well, as Cassie mentioned, our email address, impact@uwchat.org, that goes to both of us. So if any questions come up after this session that you may have thought of later on, just hit us up, shoot us an email. We'll be happy to respond to you directly. Otherwise, if you have questions and would like to request a one-on-one meeting with both Cassie and I, we're more than happy to do that. We know there's going to be a lot of questions around alignment and the 2Gen piece, especially. We've got some of those already. So if you want to, discuss ideas on how your programs can best align with the impact agenda, 2Gen and Alice, reach out to us and we'll make sure to spend some time with you to make sure you're set up and ready to go. All right.